This past summer, I was certified in 8 different aspects of scuba diving. Diving is now one of my favorite things to do, but I had only ever dove in one environment. As a result, for my project, I chose to compare diving in the Leeward Islands of the Caribbean to diving in Monterey Bay, Northern California. While both were amazing experiences, they were both very different and had unique aspects that drew me in. The morning of my dives in Monterey Bay, I woke up at 4:30 a.m. with my mom and a friend who I had dove with in the Caribbean as well, and headed down to arrive at the dive shop for our gear at 7 a.m. Once we had everything we needed, we left for the docks to load up the boat and head for our first location. 3 towering rock pinnacles with life teeming all around it. Sea urchins and starfish were the most abundant, but decorative crabs were a popular sight as well. We also saw an eel and several weavers. The second dive was a kelp forest, which I had never done before, and is now by far my favorite type of cold water diving experience. Upon reaching the bottom, I could flip onto my back and gaze up at the towering kelp forest above me. And with its thick stalks on the seafloor, it almost felt identical to walking through a redwood forest, only I was swimming. Even though there are plenty of other life to take in and watch, it was clear that the kelp was the centerpiece to gawk at, with sea otters circling and diving above. The Caribbean also had plenty of scenery and species to gawk at, but it was an entirely different experience. Every time I went below the surface, I would see something new, immediately, along with the rest of the teeming life filling the habitat. Here the water is warm and barely any current, but sparkling shades of clear blue water where it's so clear, when I stuck my head in the surface, I could see over 60 feet below. This is due to it being in warm waters versus cold water, where the nutrients is so rich and dense that it clouds a person's visibility. My favorite species that I got to see in these warm water dives were eagle rays, lemonhead sharks, baby drumfish, turtles, nurse sharks, and reef sharks. But in the bigger picture, I love seeing the coral beaming with life, abundant with hundreds of different species living symbiotically together. Unfortunately, in both places, I saw trash and coral bleaching. In the Caribbean, the trash that I saw was limited, mostly because 95% of my dives were marine reserves that have been thankfully kept pristine over the years. But for that 5%, I saw some devastating effects of climate change and plastic pollution. Not only coral bleaching that left some areas hollow with nothing more than a few fish passing by overhead, but also on one of our dives we found a medium-sized fish with some plastic wrapped around its neck. We tried for 15 minutes to save it, but unfortunately by the time we were able to safely get the wrappings off of its neck, it had already passed. At first glance in Monterey, it seemed like there was not a single piece of trash anywhere, but upon straining a fistful of sand through my gloved fingers, I realized that there was microplastic dispersed across the seafloor. Also, on the second dive I did in Monterey, I was surprised to stumble across a whole area of coral that had been bleached and abandoned, but still in sight of a colorful patch of healthy coral only a few meters away. The biggest differences between the 2 dive sites is the temperature, the diversity of life, and the assertiveness of animals. The cold water of Monterey was definitely an adjustment, as the warm water in the Caribbean made it easier to look around and be more relaxed. The next biggest difference was the diversity of life. In the Caribbean, there is such a wide variety of species that can be spotted within a few yards of each other, but there are not as many mammals swimming around. Mostly fish, sharks, jellyfish, turtles, stingrays, crabs, and other animals that are similar. In my 35 dives in the Caribbean, I had only seen dolphins swimming out of the water, but never while diving. However, in Monterey Bay, there was fish, crabs, and lobsters as well, but there was also seals, sea otters, and occasionally whales. Last but not least, the animals in Monterey were much more confident and assertive in approaching us divers, while in the Caribbean, the animals allowed us to swim close to them, but they rarely approached us to search our dive gear, as many fish did in Monterey. Overall, comparing these dive sites was inspirational for ways to help the ocean through the problem of climate change and plastic pollution, grew my inspiration for the life under the surface, and made me even more excited to dive in new diverse locations.